I am the Divine Prince, Ty Emmecca, Pan-African Spiritualist, Practitioner, Author, Advisor, Elagoon, Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeya, Bokur. I reside in this beautiful and legendary, historic Treme, New Orleans, Louisiana. So join me as I share food, music, culture, tradition, the rhythms, and the flavor of New Orleans voodoo. Respect the voodoo. Greetings, greetings, honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101. Sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, universal, healing, and holistic, evolutionary and revolutionary from a Pan-African hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing if you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. Voodoo Hoodoo 101 is brought to you by, empowered by, sponsored by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. New Orleans International Voodoo Day. New Orleans National Voodoo Day is now New Orleans International Voodoo Day. And we continue to invite your participation, your support, your donations, your sponsorship. Become a part of something extraordinary. New Orleans International Voodoo Day is not just an event, it is a movement that celebrates cultures, fosters education, and connects people from around the globe. By sponsoring this event, you're supporting a tax-deductible cause that preserves heritage, uplifts art and education, and fosters healing within the community and beyond. And we're certainly grateful for your continued love and support and participation here at 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time, weeknights, 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time, on a social media platform near you, but certainly grateful for YouTube and for StreamYard for providing us this opportunity. Thank you, Nina Lloyd, for your faithful support and participation. D Goddess, greetings and salutations, love and light to you and yours. And certainly to our co-hosts, our panelists, we are certainly grateful for my godchild, my number one priest, my wild man, Joshua Nylan Tanner, for joining us nightly. And certainly for our team member and elder Reggie, known also as Green Soap. We certainly appreciate you for being present. And Sister Toni Val Martinez. So we're going to start by opening up Elder Reggie's mic, and then we'll make way for Brother Joshua, and then Sister Toni Val will come on in and bring it in for the queens and the goddesses.
Yeah, blessing divine, blessing Joshua, blessing Sister Toni. I know we ended last night with a lot of soup, a lot of stuff in the pot, as they say. But anyway, it was all as the divine said, all was a blessing. Nothing was meant to offend anyone or to challenge anyone's knowledge. But when we having discussion, sometimes iron sharpens iron, and it's okay to have difference of opinion to try to build to a consensus. But with that being said, peace, everyone, as we move forward tonight.
Hello, everyone. This is Josh. Hope you guys having a good day, man. Yeah, last night was a great conversation that we didn't even think we was gonna have last night, but it came out the way it was supposed to. And it was very thought provoking and very very informative in a way in terms of especially hopefully for the audience, for them to, you know, get a perspective from different angles of what that documentary we had watched yesterday was all about, the context of the voodoo, context of the people and the representation of it and what it looks like, how it had the context changed throughout time and how it is today. You know, yeah, I'm looking forward to having more. Continue the conversation tonight. Toni.
Hello, everyone. How are y'all?
Hey, Toni.
Great to be here. Elder Reggie, all the
Yes.
people in the listening area. We had a good discussion last night. It was a very good video that we watched. It was very informative. It took us way, way back to the Salem witch trials. Which I studied way years ago. That was one of the first things I knew about before I even knew I was studying anything. But and it went back. I was doing some looking up into spiritualists. And it appears that spiritualism had evolved from it being people who said they could speak to the dead in seances.
Mm-hmm.
That's what most of the white counterparts were doing. And it's been recorded for a long time. And a lot of white people made a lot of money off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And which some people were saying was hoaxes and stuff. So, you know, then they moved on. That was in the 1700s and the 1800s. You can go back and find records of spiritualists,
Mm-hmm.
but they was basically dealing with talking to the dead. And one person that everybody might know who made it his life's mission to debunk all the spiritualists was Harry Houdini.
Mm-hmm.
Houdini decided and really debunked a lot of people, so much to this believed he died because of a hit that was put out on him by spiritualists, because they had like a little spiritualist union, like all the spiritualists had came together and he was like their main problem. And you know, they believe that actually a hit was placed on him by the spiritualist community. I'm trying to find the link of when that form of spiritualist stopped being in the spotlight as much and it turned over to the spiritualist churches with healings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
More
Well, I think it's
healings.
important, Toni, forgive me for jumping in, too.
Mm-mm.
For context, the documentary that we're referencing, and for those of you who didn't see it or haven't watched it more than once, I certainly invite you to go back and look at it. I've watched it 3 times since yesterday, about occultism in slavery. So the documentary starts first from the premise that white folk had to use witchcraft in order to pull off such a monumental scale event like enslavement. And it's certainly a question that I've always had, you know, as a youngin', you know, throughout the years. How do you manage to go into someone else's continent and take it over and master their warriors and their magi and their, you know, most efficient people to even move something like Eastern Africa and Western slavery forward? And it always, for me, has come back to witchcraft, occultism, and some manipulation of power, if you will. The enslavement of Black people and the occult is sort of the premise of this documentary. So it sort of begins with, you know, what sort of wickedness was put on our minds and our eyes, you know, to sort of coax us into such an arrangement But then our response to it, which Sister Toni was beginning to open up about, and that's Sister Toni, forgive me, Elder Reggie was beginning to open up in terms of the healing applications. I think we must look at retribution, retributive magic, whether it's in witchcraft or in Aboriginal, Indigenous voodoo form, retributive magic in response to the conditions that we were living in, the conditions that we were up under. I just can't imagine we were concerned about, some of the common petty little requests that often your practitioners receive today, in a time when our very survival, impinge on our mental health, our physical health, and our liberty. So retributive magic transform into resistance and revolution. The fear of resistance and revolution, further sparked by the Bois came on in the Haitian Revolution, only strengthened their resolve for things like the Black Code here in the Deep South, and curtailing our freedoms and our ability to gather, to drum, to speak out loud in public, all fueled by this fear of witches and witchcraft. Someone said, a part of their greatest fear is that, given the opportunity, we would do unto them what they've done unto us. And so if we consider, this usage of black magic and witchcraft and master science and all this other, manipulation that's been suggested in association with slavery, and enslavement, it is indeed our time. It is indeed our season to refine this retributive response and go about healing, self-healing, self-reconciliation, but then being able to create stronger institutions on this Ogu Wednesday, who we credit with, creating the foundations of the world out of iron, and create a system that we can survive in, that we can live in, and we can certainly move forward in. I was expecting Toni to come with a whole plethora of information right now about the Nephilim. That's right in her wheelhouse. And the Nephilim was another strong point that was brought up in this documentary, in terms of this religious, spiritual, mental, global manipulation that took place to allow such a thing like the Atlantic slave trade to even be conceived.
Yeah, the Nephilim is right up my alley, but I don't believe, as the book says, that magical book says, that they were giants, got people looking for 12-foot tall human hybrids. I believe that they were giants of men in the things that they could do that the average man couldn't do. They have people today that I suspect of having Nephilim DNA. And a lot of people can say, oh, they're magicians because that's sleight of hand, that's a trick, anybody could do that. No. To me, I don't believe that.
Who, Chris
I don't
Angel?
I don't believe that. I believe they have still, just like we have the DNA of that one African woman they found all those years ago, that everybody seemed to have this strand of her DNA. I still believe that they are people today and constantly, and will be born in the future, that have that strand of Nephilim DNA that allows them to do certain things.
Well, some people tie them to the story of the angels being cast from heaven and
Yes,
being sent to earth.
that's who. Okay, in my understanding, it wasn't just the angels that was cast down. At one time, angelic beings could come freely, according to the magical book,
Yeah, it will.
at will, freely, because they were here before man was on this planet. This was like they club med. They
But the
came down
magical
here.
book suggested that they had sex with earth and women.
Okay, I'm about to get to that part.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. You got it. Go ahead.
That they could come freely, and with the advent of the children of men, they came down, and the daughters of men, they was beautiful, and the angels of God found out something new that men and women was doing, called sex. And they had sex with the daughters of man, and what they produced was these beings that had the looks and features mostly of their mothers and the powers of their fathers, who were the Nephilim. Now, according to that magical book, Mary, mother of Jesus, was visited by a Nephilim, by an angel, was visited by an angel, and it was physical attraction, because even in the Bible, it notates how handsome he was to her. So from that point, to me, the person that we know as Jesus the Christ, because he was born of a flesh and blood woman, was actually a Nephilim, being why he had the powers he had to turn water into wine, to walk on water, to levitate, to heal, and all these other things that he could do.
But it's also been considered that he disappeared and went into the Middle East, went into Egypt, went into India, and learned many of these skills and these abilities and the knowledge from Aboriginal and Indigenous people.
Well, maybe he went there and they honed his knowledge. And he did learn more things that he could do that his otherwise earthly parents could not tell him he knew how to do.
Moses and Aaron, where did their power come from?
I believe
And what
their
was their
power,
relationship to the Nephilim?
I believe their powers came from the Most High. I believe their powers came from him, exactly, because everything they did was natural.
What about
The
Enoch?
animals, the water, everything, all of the miracles that they mostly performed, to me, was done by nature.
Oh,
Though,
forget about Enoch, man.
oh, well, to go into all of that, you've gone into another realm of what we call extraterrestrials. ETs, UFOs, and all of that stuff.
But I guess I'm tripping up on how you can believe in ETs but not believe in Nephilims.
Oh, I believe in Nephilims. Oh, yes, I do. I said earlier, I suspect some people today of being Nephilim, of having Nephilim DNA.
Yeah. She just don't think they was that tall, that big. It just
I
did
don't think
big
they was
acts.
12 feet tall. I think they look like regular men today, and
The demonstration was
they just had what we call today magical powers. I very much believe in Nephilim.
So yesterday I said some of it was over my head. I don't know much about the Nephilims. I just don't. I really don't much know what land they're supposed to have conquered and ruled. I've seen the word, but I never give it any thought or anything. So what region, what time frame are we talking with the Nephilims?
We talking the early beginning of the children of Adam and Eve. Set. We talking about in biblical years. We talking
Genesis, the 6th chapter.
yeah, we talking the Genesis days. And because they were making all of these people with these powers called Nephilim, it is said in the Bible that the Creator stopped them from having the will to come here whenever they got ready to. He banned them from coming here unless he sent them here on a purpose,
So Sister
like to
Toni,
Mary.
if we taking the Bible narrative, then so we saying the world is only 6,000 years old? If we follow Genesis to present day?
No, we're not saying it's only 6,000 years old.
Okay.
It goes back much further than that, but according to the book, that's what time period we looking at in the book, but we know it's gonna be
Much earlier time. Yeah.
and you know how the scientists give us prehistoric and all these big words for time frames that go back past 6,000 years. I don't know which one of those time periods, but as far as where the people were located in, it's in Africa, according to that book once again.
Okay.
So we looking at where the Tigris and the three rivers come together as being the Garden of Eden, which is the starting point, and being cast out from there and spread out like ripples in a pond when you throw a stone of people standing out to what we call Egypt today, what we call this today and that today. When I was doing research on my own in the Bible, it's very confusing because the names have been changed to confuse the innocents. And I personally could never find a map of the biblical Bible that fits with our maps today that show where Egypt is.
Well, it doesn't match the archaeology.
Yes.
And we know that all humanity came out of the cradle in the womb of Mother Africa. I believe we know it today as Nguru Crater in Kenya, East Africa region. And so it begs to, argue, well, where did civilization begin? And that's where that argument between, Mesopotamia and Egypt, really gets heated. And then race and ethnicity begin to get bastardized and appropriated and tinkered, around with. And even for those of us who have some, connection to Lemuria, Atlantis, and have done, studying even in that region, can map a different movement of humanity across the continental plates. Again, certainly gathering in Africa, and then moving out, to other portions, of the world. So, I think there's still too many missing pieces to the puzzle. I know when we look at the origins of voodoo, often in the oral tradition. Its roots are moving from East Africa, from Ethiopia, Egypt, Sumeria, wherever, into West Africa, settling sort of in Ile Ife, then becoming this sacred, West African center for the practice and the tradition. Even we think about the Ifa divination, also known as Fa, also known as Dafa, also known as Afa, depending on what ethnic group, whose story, whose creation story you are examining. So there's clearly a map there of higher consciousness. Something fell from the sky. Now whether were demons, Nephilim, aliens intervening in the development of humanity, almost all creation stories have some telling of something or somebody, falling from the sky and then interfering in the development of humanity. And when we look at the archaeological timeline, some things just do not make sense. The evolutionary process doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah.
Going from apes to so-called humanoids doesn't quite make
Makes sense.
That's one they ain't gonna never get me to go.
I'm with you, Tony.
Well, there are many tellings. I remember sitting in Mos Mariam in Chicago under Farrakhan and hearing the story of oh wow, I just went blank. The professor who created supposedly white people in a test tube in a lab.
Yaku,
Yeah,
Yaku.
yeah, that's it. That's it. And so that's just one telling, though, of sort of people crafting various humanoids. The Anunnaki supposedly utilize various other forms to sort of do their mining and their bidding, at least so the story goes, until they settled on, whichever creature that they decided to sort of put this consciousness in, and then we rapidly evolved almost overnight. So there are many tellings or versions of that telling, of that story. We just have to go back as far back in time as we can, and to as diverse a number of cultures as we can. Here in the Americas, I know in the Hopis, I used to be really proficient on the Hopi storyline, and their telling of our world being sort of created and destroyed, I believe at least 4 times, and periods where humanity has had to go underground, or has had to intervene with peoples that came from the sky people. So there's definitely something more to the story that we're still thinking to piece together. And just one more thing before I pass the mic, I believe the mysteries are embedded in quartz crystal.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I too did some research a while back on the Hopi Indians. Now it's strange. I found it strange to me that they also had a story from their ancients of a great flood.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like Noah who saved their people. Now, I've read the Book of Mormon, and they on a whole nother plane. But
Well, hold on. Let me stop you real quick. There are over 200 myths from different cultures around the world about the Great Flood.
yes. So from that, I get that at one time there actually was a great flood, and survivors of that great flood spread out over the vast continents, and their descendants carried with them that ancient story.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's the way I look at it. Because
Likewise.
even with me, my house is the world. I had children. They all grew up pretty much with the same memories. My older children have more memories than my younger children because they was around longer. Now they've
Mhm.
spread out away from my house, and they're now telling these memories to their children. And their children are going to go on and tell their children the memories their parents, and on down and on down and on down. And I believe this happened with significant events such as a flood destroying everything, that those memories would be the ones really passed down.
Yeah, storytelling is that's a way of storing memory and passing on information for a lot of cultures, especially here in America.
My biggest question today and has always been, how do we know these things? How do we know which herbs heal? Who told us that? Who was the first person that discovered this, and how did they do it? I mean, with some things, when we get into the early 1900s, we have a record of how some medicines came about, like with Marie Curie, and how this was developed and that was developed. But these ancient medical, spiritual healings, herbs, hoodoo, it goes back and back and back. Who was the first person? They have these memes on Facebook that I find so funny. It'll be a picture, a old brownie type picture of a black man or woman, and it'll say something like, the first man who said, I bet you by golly, wow. Or the first man to say, I'll slap your mama, because the food was so good. My thing is, I want to know how we know these things. Now, I do know a lot was
Well,
told to us in the 6 and 7 books of Moses that was removed from the Bible. To me, that's supposed to be from the Most High telling Moses how to protect his people from the demons, the minions of the fallen angels who were bent on destroying the children of Moses, well, the children of Adam, actually.
But
And
I see that as a crossroads of information, though, of that
yeah.
particular time in history. Going back to your original question, who was the first? And so, again, when we look at indigenous and aboriginal storytelling here, we know the
Mhm.
world has been created and recreated more than once. We're now beginning to discover supposedly megalithic structures that were created pre our history, pre our time from advanced civilizations. And even when we just go back to the mother continent, the legends and stories of animals communicating with humanity, of plants and trees being able to communicate, uh, that wisdom and that knowledge with humanity. I believe there are certain skill sets, even if we look at um, certain creative meditative applications that I utilize in my ministry, where I might have a client go into a deep meditation and pretend to be a particular crystal or a particular tree or a particular plant or a particular earth even, and you get a whole different frequency of communication, of information. How do ants communicate? Yet they orchestrate and administrate extremely well. How do animals that supposedly don't have a voice transmit and communicate individually and then collectively in groups? So I think we as humanoids have lost and gained, both lost and gained certain abilities and adaptations over time. When we think of the devices we now have and how they're now affecting our health, our eyes, people are getting carpal tunnel syndrome in their wrist at much younger ages now, who ain't never been a secretary, who ain't never wielded tools, but they're getting them from these new devices and these new traditions that humanity has now taken on, commensurate to the technology. Our ability to walk long distances, our ability to forage for food. We are slowly losing our connection to nature, i.e., our connection to spirit, and some might say willingly, because it's one thing to utilize and to adapt the technology and the devices, but it's another thing to sort of willingly give up time for self, time for meditation, time for prayer, time to go out into the garden, time to commune with God and spirit. And that's what makes voodoo, no matter how you're spelling it, hoodoo, root work, conjure, so powerful, even still today, and certainly moving forward as we continue to confront modern issues moving forward. Our ability to connect with our ancestral roots, our ancestral tradition, also opens our doorway to connecting with nature itself, to the earth itself, to our bodies, to our humanity itself. And so that's going to be a continued challenge moving forward as our world becomes much more digital, much more virtual, much more confined in these virtual spaces that we create, again, using the technology, but these spaces mirror the interdimensional spaces that we operate in every day spiritually, mentally. We just choose to live in the domain of worry or stress or the latest pop cultural gossip, as opposed to, what's the newest recipe? What's another way of me, growing something I can eat in my yard? It's really about where you are choosing to focus your energy.
Now, I agree with you when you said we lost a lot of knowledge. I have an incident that occurred with me and it stayed with me and it's with me today because I was like, how did I know that? I was pregnant with my middle daughter and I wasn't feeling well at all. And it just so happens that my husband had brought home like 3 big pots of chrysanthemums, 3 big old bushes of chrysanthemums, live chrysanthemums growing yellow and white. And I was feeling real bad and I was sitting in a chair in between 2 because I had one on each side of the chair on a nightstand. And my mind said, eat the chrysanthemum. And my mind just kept telling me, eat the chrysanthemum. And I was going back and forth with myself, thinking, I can't eat that because it will kill me. And I'm hearing my mind telling me, eat it. It'll make you feel better. And it wasn't until, and by the way, my daughter was born with a big, beautiful chrysanthemum birthmark on her back. But it wasn't until years later in researching herbs and flowers that I discovered I could have eaten the chrysanthemum. and it
Mhm.
would have made me feel better. But how did I know that? At that time when my mind was telling me to eat it.
How did a pregnant woman back in the day start craving clay?
Right.
It's because you have a deficiency and you crave
Yeah,
what you need to heal you.
but who told her that? Going back to your question, who was the first woman who decided to dig in the ground and put some clay in her mouth?
And did it occur to her like it did to me with the chrysanthemum, which I didn't go through with at the time? Now, if it would have been in these days, I would have just Googled it. Can I eat a chrysanthemum and not die? But back in those days, I didn't have that advantage, but I craved that chrysanthemum, and it was really hard for me to not put that chrysanthemum in my mouth and eat it. So I'm wondering if when she was feeling some kind of way, didn't had poor iron or whatever, um, did her mind tell her, as one of the inborn knowledges we had of nature, to
Ancestral
eat that
memory.
clay?
Ancestral memory.
Mhm.
Yes,
Even the apes, the chimps, the cats, the dogs know what plants to eat when they are ill.
yes.
Mhm.
And today that still haunts me because I'm like, how did I know that? How did I know that? And when your body craves ice, you have an iron deficiency. If you want to stop eating the ice because it's tearing your teeth up, just take some iron pills.
Mhm.
But how does you crave this? It's like Ty said, it's an ancestral memory. And that's how I'm beginning to think we know which herbs to use.
Well, as D God has said, it is a part of our DNA memory. It is in our ancestral memory. Now, I have to say, and some of my long-term listeners, y'all know what I'm about to say. It doesn't mean that you now just go out and just pick everything and pull everything and throw it in your blender and just consume it. You
No,
got to have the educational component. And so not only were we acknowledging the ancestors, by doing so, we were acknowledging the cycle of life from birth to our elders. And we learned and we sat at the feet of our elders and we consumed their knowledge and their experience. We sat at the feet of our children and we utilized their curiosity and their ancestral knowledge that they often bring into the world with them. I started playing the piano at 3.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Who taught me that? We're talking ancestral memory. Some of
Mhm.
you are proficient in math as a child. Some of you are proficient in color and design as a child. And Western culture is the distraction, if not the outright deceiver and manipulator of consciousness. And so we quickly learn from kindergarten on to sort of toe the line, count from 1 to 10, know your alphabet, prepare to get a job and work in this system. And so that time for play gets curtailed quickly.
we get
Research,
indoctrinated.
yeah, recess gets cut back quickly. Sometimes as early as the 3rd grade, they stop having
Mhm.
recess.
Mhm.
What grade do they stop having music class now?
A
Art
lot of schools
class.
don't even have that no more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
This Sunday, I had a chance to spend some time with an elder, and I learned something. If you listen to the elders, and if you could pull it out of them, you'll learn some things. And this made me go wow and had me thinking. Her daughter had just started gardening in her backyard. And she brought me out there to find out why this wasn't growing, that wasn't growing right, in the sun burning them up. So when we went back inside, I said, Mooney was showing me her garden, and grandmother said she needs to put a scarecrow there. But it's not that kind of garden. But so I'm like, why she need to put a scarecrow there? To protect the yard, to protect the house. Yeah, we had the scarecrow. We put all kind of stuff inside the scarecrow to protect the house. So that was like a light bulb went off in my head. Like scarecrows had more meaning than just to scare away the crows. Back in the day, they had stones inside of them. They had herbs inside of them, not just straw and corn silk.
Yes. Sister Toni, what I would say with that, with the scarecrow, it's a form of a fetish. It could be used as a fetish. You could put certain items in there to hold off birds and animals and other things. But it depends on the culture and what they put within the scarecrow. But with that piece of knowledge, I want to go ahead on and close out tonight. It's been a beautiful show. We went deep down another rabbit hole with the Nephilims and all that. But I still want to remind everyone that's to my listening ear of the new New Orleans International Voodoo Day, May 8th, 9th, and 10th in New Orleans in 2026. Please try to plan and make it. If you could get to New Orleans during that time frame, there'll be some rituals and some events outside of National Voodoo that we'd like to invite you to make your stay a pleasant trip. With that, I'd like to close out.
Good night, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Good night, Sister Toni. Good night, Divine. Good night, Josh. Good
I
night,
see.
everyone online.
See you.